Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. Prominent right-wing activist and co-founder of a conservative organization, Turning Point USA, was shot and killed while speaking at Utah Valley University yesterday. While there are certainly many other more far-reaching topics worthy of discussion today, including the ongoing push for release of the Epstein files, I think it's important that I touch on it not only because it is a currently breaking story, but it is because it is a piece of a much larger tapestry that encompasses a lot of topics in the current political climate. Unsurprisingly, as soon as the news confirmed that Kirk had passed away, those on the right were quick to not only deify him as practically a martyr for the conservative cause, but to point fingers at the other side of the political aisle, seeing this as evidence to support their claim that the left can only silence conservative voices with violence instead of meeting them on their level. And in some ways it's understandable, with no suspect in custody and speculation mounting as to what their possible motivation could have been for this political assassination. Their eyes turn to their perceived political rivals as clearly the only possible perpetrator. While it's naturally impossible to separate politics from this action entirely, when you get down to it, this was a man being murdered in front of his wife and children. Political allegiance really doesn't matter in the sense that this was a man who was being killed, and violence of this sort, regardless of which side of the political spectrum he fell, should be condemned and not encouraged or celebrated. But when you see the vocal outcry of voices on the right and how they feel this sort of politically motivated violence cannot stand, it really makes you wonder where these voices were when Minnesota Representative Melissa Hortman was assassinated only a few short months ago. Where were they when Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's house was firebombed earlier this year? Or when Paul Pelosi was savagely beaten with a hammer in 2022? Apparently, politically motivated violence and murder is only bad when it's their guy, when it's someone who was voicing the things that they believe and think. Yet when the victims are those on the left, they are strangely silent. But it could also be that Charlie Kirk was very important to the proliferation of the conservative message. Through his organization, Turning Point USA, which he co-founded when he was only 18, Charlie Kirk was instrumental in spreading the message of conservatism to a young generation, an age group that conservatives have long tried to rope in and to save from what they see as the insidious leftist values of tolerance and equality. So it's unquestionable that on top of a loss of a human life, conservatism lost a prominent voice into the youth. It's also concerning because he will undoubtedly be used as a tool, a sort of martyr even, to the conservative cause that they can use in furthering the goal of militarizing our nation. If a left-wing gunman could take out one of their greatest living conservative voices, they could be anywhere. They could be a risk to any of them. So sending armed National Guard to the Democrat cities isn't enough. We must send armed military to all the cities to protect the people. It could almost be argued that Charlie Kirk will be more useful in death than he was in life. They'll use his murder as proof that Democrats and the left are just a bunch of domestic terrorists and must be rounded up and eliminated for the good of the public and national security. And while it may be veering a bit into conspiracy theory territory, I couldn't help but wonder if the timing was just a little convenient. Barely 24 hours after the revelation of the so-called Epstein birthday book and a letter within allegedly written and signed by current President Donald Trump, and the ensuing denials that that was his signature and he would never have put such a thing to that man, even though Jeffrey Epstein was one of his best friends at the time. Such a prominent political assassination, clearing out the headlines of news of the Epstein revelations and Donald Trump, the ongoing Epstein files story, it does feel like a bit more than a coincidence, when in actuality it very well may have been. The idea that he may have been sacrificed, quote unquote, to protect President Trump, if only very temporarily, from further scrutiny and headlines, doesn't strike me as entirely implausible. They do say a cornered animal is capable of anything, and at this point, Donald Trump certainly is starting to look like one. In a bit of irony, if one could even call it that, Charlie Kirk was previously quoted as saying that he felt that some gun deaths every year were a worthy cost to preserve the Second Amendment and other God-given rights. So he's now become one of the statistics that he had championed. Now, this isn't to say that it's a good thing that he died, or it's a good thing that someone killed him. Charlie Kirk was instrumental in planting the seeds of conservatism and right-wing ideologies into the minds of younger people who were then in turn being cut off from critical thinking. But even with him gone, the messaging that he put forward is not going away. It's not going to be diminished. So taking him as a person off the board doesn't change anything in the political landscape or political messaging. So if it turned out that it is as the right-wing believers claim, then it was a left-leaning assassin who wanted to silence Charlie Kirk's voice. They will have largely failed in that endeavor. But personally, I don't ascribe to that theory. I don't think this was a cut and dry leftist murder of a prominent right-wing voice. If that was really all there was to it, there were certainly much more high-profile and more prominent right-wing voices to do that to. Ones whose loss would make a much greater impact and done in a much more prominent and visible location than just a college campus in Utah. But naturally, until there's a suspect in custody, or at least identified, speculation will just swirl, and it will be far too easy to build a narrative based purely on conjecture and gut feeling. Like any tragedy, the first instinct is to search for a reason why, a motivation, an explanation for why this terrible thing had to happen. And with today being the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, it seems almost appropriate to be searching for meaning for what feels like a senseless loss of life. I think it's almost easy to give into the temptation to celebrate the removal of one's political enemy. Those on the right are certainly well versed in that. But of course, that wouldn't feel right or appropriate. As I said at the start, when you get down to it, this was a man being murdered in front of his children, in front of his wife, in front of a bunch of college students who shouldn't have had to watch a man be graphically killed in front of them. For all the damage he's done and all the hateful rhetoric and near celebration of the death of his own political rivals, taking comfort in the death of Charlie Kirk is not something anyone should look to do. Instead of seeing this as an example of left-wing terrorism and the persecution of conservative voices, the shooting death of Charlie Kirk should be seen as an example of the consequences of loose gun regulation and the need for tighter gun control, something the numerous school shootings we've had in this country in the last few years has seemingly failed to do. And I say this as we had another school shooting literally yesterday at a Colorado high school. But if history is any indication, this will actually have the opposite effect. And for many pro-gun advocates, will use this as a way to advocate for the need for more guns, not less guns. And as usual, the completely wrong takeaways are being taken from this event. I, for one, do not relish the murder of Charlie Kirk. I'd always seen him as complicit in the indoctrination of vulnerable minds into a mindset of hardline conservatism and almost Christian nationalism. While I think he's been a part of a damaging force in this country, I do not think that that meant he deserved to be killed. While I never agreed with him ideologically, his death does remain a tragedy, and the perpetrators, whoever they may be, should be brought to justice. But I fear those on the right may try to frame Charlie Kirk as the conservative Martin Luther King, a man who was killed for his beliefs, and his outspoken love for conservatism and God was what painted a target on his head, or I guess neck. His murder is awful, but he was not a conservative martyr. He did not die as a sort of Christ figure who sacrificed himself for his beliefs. Violence of this type, regardless of which side of the aisle you stand, should never be seen as a viable tool to push your personal political ideas. I would say I hope those on the right would learn from this and take a positive lesson from this terrible event, but I also know that those on the right don't enjoy learning anything. They like to be told what to think and what to believe than to reach that on their own volition. Unquestionably, we have a gun problem in this country, and Charlie Kirk's murder is a symptom of that problem and should be treated as such, not as a sign that the left are political terrorists, homegrown insurgents, and now we need civil war against them, as surprisingly or maybe unsurprisingly some have voiced in the wake of this tragedy. We have enough villains in this world, one of which is sitting in the presidency. We really don't need to be looking out for even more. We should be coming together, not moving farther apart. And I really, really hope this doesn't lead to retaliatory violence from those on the right to their perceived enemies on the left. But I also know if history has taught me anything, that is unfortunately a very realistic possibility. Though I can only hope I'll be proven wrong. Alright guys, so that's it for this episode of A Slice of News. And I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off another slice of news.